Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tanya. And thank you everyone for being here. We are excited to share some of our information with you in hopes that it inspires or it helps you on your journey as well. So as Tanya mentioned, my name is Nicole Roman, and I'm here with Vanessa Ho, and we are presenting on how our district counseling collaborative efforts and how we share student success using data. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and just so you know, there's a little cloud in the top of your screen with a bit.ly to our slide deck if you would like to reference it and borrow any of our slides.
And it is now in the chat, so feel free to go in there. All right.
Since we are on Zoom, we have a few asks. We're on a webinar, and so you don't really need to worry about muting yourself. But if you do have any questions, feel free to use either the chat box or the Q&A. Nicole and I, along with Tanya and Zaret, will be monitoring it. And as we're going through, we'll try to answer your questions throughout our presentation. And we will have some moments for you to engage. And so we really ask that you put your answers into the chat and just let us know what you're thinking.
So a little bit about us. As mentioned earlier, Vanessa and I started at San Diego State in grad school. So we were actually San Diego natives and went to college and came back and we met. We had our practicum site at Mueller Charter School. It's a K through 8. And then we worked at Hoover High School as interns as well in City Heights. I then went on my way and became an elementary school counselor in Oceanside. And then I went to Escondido as well and was a middle school counselor there. And then I found my way back to Poway.
And I have always been a high school counselor, besides my little stint as in my practicum at K through 8, which was great. And I learned a lot. But then after Hoover, I stayed at Hoover for a year and also was able to sub at the alternative education school, Twain, in San Diego Unified. And then I went to Half Moon Bay High School, which is up in the Bay Area. And then for the past 9 years have been at Poway at Westview High School.
All the while, we had been collaborating here and there as Hatching Results professional learning specialists. So I think we did some work out in Atlanta or Bibb County, worked on folks there to help create their comprehensive counseling program. We also had the wonderful opportunity to teach at SDSU as adjunct faculty, teaching a couple classes. And then we also were proud site supervisors for San Diego State as well, working with tons of different practicum and fieldwork students and having them teach us as well. Another side note is that we both are also passionate about traveling, equity, and intervention in our work. So you'll see that weaved in throughout the presentation as well.
So we hope that through this presentation, you're able to learn on how we built our district collaboration in the time that we've been able to work together in Poway Unified. And it didn't just start at Poway Unified. Our own separate journeys led us to be able to bring all the information that we've learned and all the things we've done to really collaborate and make our district counseling programs stronger. You'll also learn a little bit about the different types of data, and we'll show you examples of those. And then we'll discuss the important ways of sharing data and your results, and we'll give you tons of examples of those with links that are available in that slide deck.
So we wanted to start off with sharing a little bit about our own journeys. After grad school, we went our separate ways for a few years, and we were able to still utilize different ways to be able to highlight our student success. So I started off, actually, I'm going to rewind just a little bit. To be transparent, when I got into grad school and learned that San Diego State and counseling program was focusing on data, it scared me a little bit. Math, I wasn't a math student yet. And so the idea of using data really kind of intimidated me. And so the more that I learned about it in grad school and the more that I was able to see how in the work that I am passionate about, that it was much easier this way, and people that helped me through my journey as well, and understanding what data looked like for schools and for advocating for school counseling made it that much easier and more enjoyable. So that's where I started in Oceanside Unified on my own with my own wings at Libby Elementary. I was the sole counselor at Libby Elementary, and I was on an elementary and secondary school counseling grant. So there were 3 other wonderful ladies who I got to collaborate with across the whole district. So there were 4 of us working on this grant. One thing that we found was very, very helpful, because we were working in silos, as oftentimes elementary school counselors have to do at their site. we worked together and we collaborated to carve out a lot of our PLC, our professional learning time. Nobody mandated it from us, but we thought it was very helpful. And in doing that, we aligned a lot of our work in deciding what data to collect together. So it wasn't just one site collecting one thing, the other site collecting the other thing. We agreed upon some of the data and some of the criteria regarding report cards and discipline, and we would always bring it back together at least once a month once we got the ball rolling. So that was very, very helpful, and I'm still very grateful for those ladies today. I started off small with just little emails here and there sharing some of the program successes. And then as I continued to build, National School Counseling Week was a great way and time to be able to share some of the information that I was gathering, some of the data I was gathering on the groups that I worked with and the lessons that we were doing in our core curriculum. And then because I was on a grant after a few years, we were on the grant for about 3 years and I stayed at Oceanside for 4. There was a board presentation that we did to be able to advocate for the work that we were doing, the success that we were seeing because those 4 elementary school sites had counselors. And then we also utilized a little video too to pull on the heartstrings to be able to show not only the qualitative, but the quantitative data as well. From there, I decided I wanted to spread my wings a little bit more, and I became a middle school counselor in Escondido Unified School District, where I had the wonderful opportunity to collaborate and learn a lot more from different folks. Here, I continued the work with being able to collect, since I had that foundation of collecting data for groups and core curriculum through my pre and post tests, I started to collect more of the data and share some of this data at school counseling advisory boards. So opening it up to other community members, building those systems with other meetings. I continued the work with staff meetings and sharing the information, as well as district counseling meetings and different newsletters. Here is where I really found that even sharing with the students, sharing the data with the students within the core curriculum presentation was really empowering as well. So it was not only with the families and the community and fellow educators and colleagues, but empowering the students to see what they're learning and what they're seeing and to be able to express the need of what they need to learn or want to learn still. From there, Vanessa actually, knowing that I have a huge passion for intervention, she mentioned to me that Poway Unified had a position that was new and it was focusing on middle school intervention. It was going to be a position that was split between 2 schools. And that kind of intimidated me, but I also was excited for the challenge of being able to learn 2 different systems and especially focus on intervention and using data to drive our interventions. So I jumped on board, followed Vanessa to Poway Unified, and I loved my role as an RTI or MTSS counselor. I was able to work with wonderful, awesome counselors that I still get to work with today, and being able to build different programs and use data and be able to share what works across the middle schools. And so I continued with our group counseling results, and I was starting to work with my interns and being able to create that and mimic that as well. And so we were able to share that, and it would get shared with different school sites, and eventually I think at the district level where we presented as well, Vanessa, some of the work that we were doing using data to share the student success. And then again, continuing to make sure our families know and our staff are able to see the wonderful successes that our students are having because of their collaboration and because of our counseling programs. So as you can see, a little bit all over the place in regards to where in San Diego I've been, what grade levels, different ways that we've been able to share it in my journey. And then I know I learned a lot from Vanessa as well, so I'll pass the mic to her.
Thank you, Nicole. So like Nicole and I mentioned, we both worked at Hoover for our field work and when we were in graduate school. And we were really lucky to work there because they already had a lot of systems in place because of their work with the City Heights Collaborative. So they did a lot of vertical articulation with their elementary, middle, and high school feeders. And we were able to do a lot of systemic things to build into their program, things around collecting data. So we did a lot of data collection. When we met with our at-risk seniors, we pre-tested them and did a needs assessment to see what kind of services can we provide them. So a lot of my experience at Hoover was around collecting data, which I was the same as Nicole. When I came into counseling for my counseling program, I just thought it was about advocating for students. I had no idea that data was part of advocating for students. And so when I did hear that, I was like, how am I supposed to do that? And we took a psychometrics class where we had to do statistical graphs. And I was like, I don't know if this is the right job for me. But then when I applied it to what we were doing as counselors, it made so much sense. And it helped and really helped me understand how to narrow down the scope of my work. So instead of focusing on all 600 students I might have on my caseload, I can really make sure that as long as I'm providing tier 1 services to all those students, I can really provide more intentional guidance and services to students who needed more. And I could use data to collect that. And that's what we really were able to practice when we were at Hoover as fieldwork students, especially with some freedom and time because we didn't have full, huge caseloads to have to work with. So the following year, I was a long-term sub there and was able to have a full caseload of students and really see how it's implemented with that work. And it was harder than it was definitely from being a fieldwork student. But I loved how it was such a focus of their program. And so I learned a lot from there. And at the end of the year, what I loved about San Diego Unified was that I remember going to a presentation where every single school got up and presented on what they had done that year. Whether or not they used a ton of data or not, they still talked about what they did. They shared what their program consisted of. And I really found that as a valuable thing. And with it being my first experience as a counselor, I thought that was the norm. Until I went to the next school I was at, where it really wasn't. The sharing the data was not a norm, but we did have really good systems at Half Moon Bay High School around we had a really good core curriculum foundation. So with myself and I was lucky enough to also have another San Diego State grad who was very familiar with data, who I worked with there. We were able to do more pre-post tests, do a needs assessment, and really be able to collect and inform our work. And while sharing the data was not a huge stress for us, and that at that time, it became a big part of our work. The data collection really helped because at the end of the year, they were looking at cutting several positions, counseling positions in that school district. So it was a unified school district, and they were planning on cutting one person from the middle school and one person from the high school, where there were already very few counselors in that district. And so with that data that we're able to collect, we were able to then present to the board, and we had so many parents and students there advocating for the counseling programs. And so I really at that point saw the power of what data can do and how sharing your data can really impact your job and the services that you can offer to your students. So I'm very happy to say that we were able to keep those positions, and they still have those positions now today. And then I was able to go to Poway Unified and work at Westview, where when I first started at Westview, every single counselor at my site did things different. When you talk about intervention, one person did intervention one way, another person did it another way, and there was really no system. And I was kind of shocked, especially having had my previous experiences where there was so much collaboration and there was already systems put in place. So I knew that I had to slowly figure out how to make that happen. And so I did. I attached myself to a counselor who I felt was doing things how I would do them. And I said, okay, well, I'll do it exactly how you did it. And then when other counselors saw, well, what are you guys doing? Then I said, well, this is what I thought that's what everyone was doing. And then I was like, how about we all try this? What would work for everybody? And just trying to create those relational agreements of while one person might be willing to do a little bit more than another, how do we all at least come to a general consensus of what we're all going to give as the basic services for our students? And so in the 9 years I've been here, we all do everything the same now. We are very collaborative. We all, and I'm not saying I changed that necessarily, but it was that lens of I was just so used to working with people collaboratively. So we were able to do that. And in the past, I would say at least 4 or 5 years, we've been able to share our data with our staff, with our parents. And it's kind of intimidating to share your data because you're putting all the things you do and you care so much about out there for people to judge. And honestly, we've never had anything but positive feedback from it. So I definitely my journey has been one of growth and learning, and I've been fortunate and lucky to see it done well and to also have colleagues like Nicole who do it well. So in our collaboration in Poway, this is where Nicole and I kind of come together and talk about how we have been able to work together to help our entire unified counseling program shine.
So I think just naturally, because Vanessa and I were connected from grad school, we would share things here and there about how their school was doing it, maybe make a copy of it, take what we could. But I feel like we really didn't start heavily collaborating until COVID, and we were able to see that. So building collaboration in Poway Unified for me, I was able to see that just within the recent couple of years. So with all the unfortunate things that have come from COVID and the work that we've done and the efforts that we've put into, I'm glad to see that that's one of the silver lining, that as counselors, we have really come together to collaborate and to create spaces and time to collaborate. So for our students, I think Zoom was huge for that. So our middle school team started meeting more regularly. We'd have our counseling department or PSSA meetings maybe once a month, once every couple of months, and then we'd have a little bit of time to collaborate if counselors were able to stay on site. But Zoom really opened it up where we were sharing information, meeting on a regular basis, supporting each other, so that we weren't recreating the wheel. And if it was working at one site, sharing the wonderful things that they're doing so that all our students were able to benefit from that. Vanessa, do you want to share a little bit about the CRF process as well?
And even prior to Zoom being a thing that we all use now, we didn't really collaborate as a district across levels, even within, like for me, for the high school levels, there's 5 schools in our high schools in our district. We didn't necessarily collaborate with one another on how we did things that were pretty district-wide things we did. Like for instance, how we did our course request process for our incoming 9th grade students. We all did them very different, and we have multiple feeder schools. So all of the middle schools, like where Nicole's coming from, would have 3 or 4 different high schools that they're trying to collect information from and trying to disseminate information to their students for, and we all did it different. And so I think prior to needing to use Zoom and going virtual, we started very slowly trying to, during those counselor meetings and everything, work together on, well, what do you do, and share best practices. That became a very popular theme prior to going virtual, was how we need more time to collaborate and share best practices, because we would only hear through the grapevine what someone at another school was doing, and we didn't know how they did that. How does that work? I know at the high school level, we send emails to one person at every site just as a, hey, how do you guys do this? And then we would get feedback from everybody that way. But these Zoom opportunities and having monthly standing meetings with certain groups of people helps us have, okay, we have an agenda. Here are the things that we need to talk about. Is there anything else that is coming up at your sites? And it allows us to be in constant communication. But what we really followed, I think, from this was our elementary schools. Our elementary school counselors are amazing in our district. They have been collaborating and working on this since way before Nicole and I even had been in Poway Unified. And so Fran Halmerson is one of the people who she has spearheaded all of it in the elementary level and is a huge advocate for counselors, where I remember she shared with us recently that when she started in the district, there were maybe 4 or 5 elementary counselors for 25 plus schools. And then now we have one dedicated counselor at every single elementary school site. So her advocacy and collecting data and sharing that has been huge in making our program, and especially our elementary school counselors, really successful. And part of that is that she met. And the middle and high school counselors never met as a group outside of these whole counseling meetings. So to what Nicole was saying, Zoom helped us meet without having to be off our site. And so we're able to, multitask and do different things, but still be present and be able to share best practices with one another.
Talking about Fran, she San Diego County Elementary School Counselor of the Year. As soon as I got into the district about 4 years ago, I saw the work that she was doing, and kind of like Vanessa, I said, I jumped right on. I said, I love what she is doing. How come we're not doing that? How come we can't do that yet? Let's go there. And I started picking her brain and asking her, what her thoughts are, or how she was able to do that and share. She was so open. They were so open to sharing the resources and what their best practices. So like Vanessa said, we kind of rode Fran's coattails and said, hey, let's continue to do this work. And, our middle schools and high schools are working really hard too, and they're amazing. Why don't we collaborate more together? So I think building those relationships, we're in counseling because that's what it's about, right? But even within colleagues, to be able to build relationships with like-minded folks who are just as passionate in the certain strengths or areas that you are into is so important. Vanessa and I continue to collaborate because we get really passionate about different systems that are working and maybe systems that we can improve to make it more efficient and more effective for all our students. And then being at the table. So I know Vanessa, she's been here in Poway for a long time. And so we start continuing to collaborate together. When the opportunity came up to work together as co-presidents to help support our counseling programs, we agreed and jumped in it together. And it's been a beautiful year to be able to collaborate with our district leadership, to hear some of the needs that they're sharing, and our board members, to work with our fellow counselors as we're on the ground with them, and to be able to advocate for our needs. so that we can advocate for our students, and just being there so that they hear that the counselors are there, that they hear the wonderful work that we're doing. Being able to be at the table, to be able to share and advocate for our programs is so important. So any leadership opportunities that you have definitely has helped to be able to jump on that.
And I think part of the being seen as a leader and being at the table is the sharing the work. As long as I've been in Poway, Fran has always been at every opportunity that there is to be at the district level, even as a leader, because she always shared her information. She was always going to whoever would listen and saying, look at what I'm able to do. We really need more of this. And so when they saw her doing that, they were like, well, we should really who was that lady who shared all that information? We should really bring her over here and make sure that she has a voice in this. I know I was asked to be a part of reworking how counseling is evaluated, how counselors are evaluated in our district. And I remember being in that room and with Fran there and thinking, I am so fortunate that counselors in this district are seen as leaders and able to be part of this process. That's not just an HR process that's done behind closed doors, but really they're looking at, what do counselors feel like they need to be evaluated on? And, we looked at the national model and really looking at how does that, how are we measured on the right metrics? And so, building those relationships by being present and sharing what you're doing is so important in order to be invited to that table.
So in the slide that you see now, there's a photo of the four of us. Recently, in February, during National School Counseling, we took the opportunity and ran with it to be able to present our data this year in our work with Mending Matters, our new social workers, the elementary, middle school, and high school, and the work that we've been doing to share. And we had such overwhelming feedback in regards to the work that we've done and wanting to see more data. I know I'm always about it, but I know not everybody's always on the same page, but it was so wonderful to be able to hear our student leaders, our community leaders, our board members asking for more and they wanting to see. And so you can see, I think, Vanessa, that might be your guys' end of the year data, but we have shared with them, and our counselors across the district have created opportunities and worked really closely together this year to be able to share some data at the end of the year, where we'll have a little gallery walk, because we do so many great things at our sites and our students are thriving because of it. And to be able to share the cool things that we do at the end of the year with everybody, I think not only benefits our students, but benefits us in working together and learning together to make our work even better. So you'll see there in the little screen, all those little circles with the links on there are live links. And you can see the little board presentation that we did in February.
Oops, I didn't mean to click it, but we're going to ask you, why should you measure and share results? But since I accidentally clicked it, it's right there in front of you. So I feel like we're preaching to the choir. Counselors typically know, why should I measure and why should I share my results? It's usually the how that gets in the way. But, as we've already talked about, it's to really advocate for your position, advocate for your students, and to also narrow your scope of what you're doing. We have so much on our plates and so many things that we do. If we measure and we are really looking intentionally at the results and the data that we're collecting, we can really work more efficiently than working super hard and spinning our wheels, doing the same thing over and over again and wondering why we don't get different results. So even if your results, I always hold my breath when I'm collecting my data and I'm analyzing it, because I'm like, did it work? Please tell me it worked. And then when it doesn't, I'm a little disappointed, but I'm also like, okay, why didn't it work? What do I need to do different? And so if I didn't look at that, I would just think, oh yeah, everything's great, it all works. And so then I would just I realized that no, it doesn't. And so what do I need to do different? Anything else about this, Nicole?
I think it all comes down, Vanessa, to sometimes it can be difficult as school counselors. I feel like it might not be in many of our nature, myself included, to feel like, okay, this is the work I'm doing. I feel like I'm bragging, but it's not. It's not bragging about what you're doing. It's promoting program results and promoting your student success. And I think that's a mind shift, a mind frame that we really need to go into it, remembering, because if we're not doing what we can do for our students. And it's our ethical obligation to be able to promote our student success and to be able to be reflective and see what's working and what isn't, to be able to transparently continue to improve. And so keeping it student-centered, as we always are, I think is important in the work that we do with sharing our data as well.
So in the chat, if you can put on a scale of 0 to 5, how comfortable are you with collecting and analyzing data? 0 meaning not at all comfortable, and 5, I'm super comfortable with this. This is just a review. I know all this stuff.
I'll give you a minute. Thank you. I see some 4s, some 3s. Thank you for plugging it in.
Awesome.
3s. Wonderful.
Perfect. So we have a lot of people who feel pretty comfortable with it. And maybe a couple of people who are like, I'm still figuring it out, and that's okay. Awesome. All right. And like we said, that's why we talked about our journey, because we weren't comfortable with it initially too. And I know a lot of counselors who've been counselors for a long time, but never were asked to do that. And so it doesn't matter where you are in your counseling journey. It's just a matter of when you are asked to start doing this, or even when you realize you need to start doing this. And you start from there as to create that comfortability. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get.
If you can count, which you already are doing in the chat, you can collect data and you can advocate for your students. There are different types of data, and I think starting small and starting where you're comfortable is totally okay, and building up comfort and systems. And so on the left, on the slide, you'll see the 3 different main types of data. They fall under the categories of participation data, mindsets and behaviors data, and outcome data. So the participation data is probably the easiest one to collect. It's the who, what, where, when. Jumping back to the first slide, participation data is like number of students. So if you can count how many numbers of students you worked with in group for the semester, how many number of students you saw for individual counseling, how many number of students were able to benefit from your classroom presentations, that's data. Number of group sessions, number of groups even, that's all participation data, and it's all powerful information to be able to collect, start monitoring, and being able to share out, because they have no idea sometimes what we're doing and how many students we're working with. To be able to see that is very powerful as well. So the second component of it is mindsets and behavior data. That's where it gets a little bit trickier, but once you get into the flow, you can just make a copy of things and you edit things, and it works. This is the pre-post test data. This is what students, teachers, parents, other staff, what they believe, what they feel, what they can do, and what they know. So this is facilitated usually through surveys, pre-post test surveys, pre-survey before a parent presentation, and a post-survey after to see what they learned. Pre-survey working with students in a group setting, in a group counseling setting, and then posting them after, or classroom lessons, whether it's the teachers or the students, just being able to see what they were able to learn from the work that they did with you, as well as behavioral observation. So lots of different things to be able to gauge how our collaborators and stakeholders are learning, and what they're learning, and what we can improve. The last bit of data is another, I guess, level up, where sometimes this might be a little bit more intimidating and maybe a little bit, in all transparency, more difficult to access. But knowing that this is where we want to be, or having all 3 components of these data is important. So this is the achievement, or the achievement related or achievement data. This is the big ticket, golden ticket data that folks are looking for to see, is there improvement? So looking at attendance. Is the students' attendance improving? Are students coming to school more because A, B, and C, because of your work, because of your counseling program services? Discipline, because of the work we do, the students are able to focus and understand the behavioral expectations, and are more well-adjusted, and socially, emotionally, they're feeling good, and that they're able to focus on what they need to focus on is school, and being adjusted at school. Report card data. Grades, D's, F's, some of that citizenship data, N's and U's, maybe if you're in an elementary school, needs improvement, satisfactory, all of that. Those are all helpful components of data as well that we're able to access and utilize to guide our work, and to see if there's been any efficacy in the work that we've done. And then of course there are the achievements, so test scores and iReady scores and things like that, to gauge how students are doing, and if they are indeed learning, and how we're supporting teachers and working as a team to be able to support the students learning is data, outcome data as well, that we can look at.
So when we're looking at participation data, it's the who, what, when, where, how. So you can do this in so many different ways. So we showed it, in here we have a couple different examples. The one on the bottom with the bowl of lollipops is at National School Counselor Week. So, thanking the staff for collaborating and for all their support of the counseling program and our students and families. And just putting a really quick sheet of, with your help, we've been able to do this many meetings and this many groups. And, this can look like whatever data you have. If you have, even if you just want to highlight parent meetings or, send a thank you to your PTSA, thank you for publicizing our different parent events, like workshops, like we were able to have this many. And so that it could be as simple as something like that. And then on the right-hand side is what our elementary school counselors, like we said earlier, they rock. This is a mid-year report that they do every year where they show over all of the elementary schools, here is how many students that we've received tier 3 services, second step lessons, student success meetings. But the big piece is, how do you collect this? And so do you create systemic forms for your counseling program or across your district? I know with our elementary counselors, they try to create things that everyone can use. And so they share a lot of information on, here's how I will track this information. Even at the high school level, we have been collaborating and trying to figure out, well, how do we accurately track every kid that walks through our office doors? And so trying to really come up with creative ways that don't hinder a student from coming in or create barrier to our more natural rapport, but also are able to really look at, okay, this is what kids are coming in to see me for. So if they're all coming in for, schedule changes and it's taking up this much of my time, how do we readjust our practice and our systems in our school and on our campus to reroute them or have other services available to them to help support them, so that I can make myself more available for other things.
So if you are feeling more ones and twos on collecting data, participation data is a great way to start. I think collecting it as much as you can on a daily basis is ideal once you get that system going, but definitely taking a look back and reflecting maybe at the end of the quarter, at the end of the trimester, to kind of gauge, okay, how did I do here? How many groups here? How many students here? And then creating that system so that it's calendared every certain time of the year, every grading period, has been really, really helpful, because it's just a flag in my head that tells me, okay, it's time to go back and collect data. And usually those ends of the grading periods, they're usually around breaks. And I know transparently for me too, I would try to track the data, but then I wouldn't get to it until maybe the end when the flag comes up and says, hey, you need to collect it. And then maybe I'll spend a day to review some of my data before a break. So that definitely is one helpful tip for me that in starting my journey has really been helpful to me. And it's just kind of become a routine, just like everything else. And I get other people on board who are interested in collecting data, who want to work with that in that space. And that's the calendar times of the year has been very helpful.
So with the mindsets and behavior data as well, these are like your attitude, knowledge, and skills. So what I put on here is an example. I do a presentation in our 9th grade class on stress and anxiety. So we do a pre-test with our students, and it's just a Google form. So this is linked, I believe, for you to be able to click on that and make a copy of it if you wanted to. But really it should be your pre-post should be based off of the presentation that you're delivering. So if you're presenting on, bystander, how to be not be a bystander during bullying, sorry, not a middle school counselor, but you would want to go through your presentation and really look at what are the things that I want my students to learn. And then you create those questions from there. And you should have things around their attitude. Like, I believe that I can, stand up to bullying when I see it happening. Or for my stress and anxiety lesson, I believe that I have the coping strategies needed to reduce my stress. So that's them saying that they believe they have that. But then I also ask them knowledge questions. So the things I'm teaching them in my lesson. So, I will ask them, what are the signs of stress? And I will list them, and or which of the following is not a sign of stress, and have them identify that as well. And so you can see here, this is the actual results of the pre and post. So I gave them this pre-test prior to the lesson, and then I gave them the same exact test. I changed the top and made a copy and called it a post test. And then I compared the information from those. And so you can see here, more students from the pre-test to the post-test strongly agreed and agreed that they have the coping skills needed to reduce their stress, and the strongly disagreed and disagreed, sorry, I didn't fix that, went down. And so just really showing you that, it can be as simple as a Google form, and then just looking at the data after that.
I am all about Google Forms because just like Vanessa said, it's just simply make a copy. And once you have that copy, you can do it for different topics. And you've got the set of questions on attitudes, on some of the knowledge and the content from the lesson, and then a skill that you want to test them on. And like Vanessa said, one major tip for me is making sure I have the lesson or the presentation right up next to the pre and post test to know that I'm pulling questions directly from the lesson that I taught. So that's been very, very, very helpful.
And depending on what level you're at, I know like at our site, every student is supposed to have a Chromebook with them or a device. But even if I don't want them to necessarily pull out their entire device and get to it, I will just ask them to quickly pull out their phone, take I put up a QR code to the pretest, or I put a bit.ly, so it's easy for them to type it in. Ask them to quickly do that, and then it's the instructions on, okay, everyone, put everything away, take out your pen, your note, like, so it doesn't, the phone doesn't then become a distraction. But the devices, sometimes it's nice to use them to your advantage, but it totally depends on your school site and what your, what's a normal process for your guides. All right.
So the last bit of data is the outcome data, the big ticket items. So looking at GPAs or DNFs before your group, as you can see there on the left, pre-group, my group cumulative GPA was 1.67. And after 8 weeks of working hard on some skills and building rapport and motivating them, the group GPA increased by 20% and is 2.02 at the end of group. This is where Vanessa had mentioned, this is where we hold our breath to see if it worked. And oftentimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. And going back to the drawing board, here I was looking at attendance on the right side. So you can see that there was a case study on one student who had some major attendance issues, and then working with them and looking at their grades or their attendance and their grades during the time that I was working with them versus after I had let go and kind of let them do their thing in hopes that they retain some of those skills and that motivation. You can see it was up high with absences, came down a little bit, and then went up slightly, but still a lot better than when it was before when we got them. It's not to say that it was just our counseling program that helped the students' attendance, but we know that we are one component of the collaborative efforts that help the student do better in school and be in school. So those are the important pieces that are huge that we want to work our way up to be able to collect data and to be able to share it.
So we want you to think of what data do you already collect now and have easy access to right now. And so if you can put that in the chat, what do you have access to that you already have systems in place, or that maybe you have your calendar for your, how many lessons or groups you do? If you could even just count, like if you can go back to that and count, how many did I do? Like I know I live by my Outlook calendar, so that's kind of how I look up how many 504s did I have. How many, I do have spreadsheets also, but I know I can go to my calendar and access that. So what do you have right now? If you can put that in the chat. Yes, I agree. I want to say to Tara. I also love the idea of showcasing a case study student, especially if you're starting small, or if you put a lot of work into one particular student. It's like, okay, let's see if did all of these things work, especially when you're sharing that with teachers, because maybe you might get some resistance to why are they out of my class and going to this group or meeting with you. You can really show like these are the topics we covered and here's what we've been able to see so far.
I love it. We're seeing lots of different things. And one thing that I also wanted to reinforce is Tara mentioned so many things if we just ask. And I think that's the piece. Sometimes we don't have the access to it yet, but if we just ask, they're happy to give it to us. And then we're able to show them what we do with it and how it guides our work. So definitely it's definitely a process, and it's an ongoing process for sure. I love it. PBIS.
And I know our level of comfort with data in particular, or even our systems, like how to even pull the data from our student data management systems, can be different for everybody. I'm the kind of person who I feel like I need to pull it because I know exactly what I'm looking for, and I need to pull the data from my student report system, so I make sure it's right. But I know a lot of people who are not like that. They're just like, give me what I can get and I will figure it out from there. And so however your comfort level is, just knowing who the right people are to ask for that data. Like if you have someone in your office who is so great at your student management system, then ask them, say, do you know how to pull this attendance data? Do you mind doing it for me? Like that, if you don't feel comfortable knowing how to do it. But even if you do want to know, there's always people who can show you. Awesome.
So collecting data is very important to be able to share it, right? And on the next slide, you'll see that our ASCA standards, it's important to share our data with our outcome, to share data outcomes with our stakeholders, to be able to highlight that comprehensive data informed program, that it's not just we're kind of guessing what we're doing, but truly, the needs are there. We're highlighting that we acknowledge the needs and that the work that we're doing is aligned and is driven by the needs of the students. And it's not just haphazard or random acts of guidance. We also wanted to kind of on the next slide, see how comfortable you were sharing with results. I know sometimes people can access the results, but another level to it is how comfortable, again, do you feel about sharing the student successes? So if you want to throw that into the chat as we keep moving, want to kind of gauge where everyone's at. Awesome.
I know for myself, I'm very comfortable collecting and looking at data. I actually get really nervous sharing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what are they going to think? Are people going to question my graphs and my charts? I get really nervous about that and making mistakes on that when I'm putting it out to my professional community.
Yes, I would definitely run my data by my math teachers just to make sure so they can help me out and judge me before I put it out to the rest of school as well. I love seeing the variety of numbers in the chat as well. Thank you for sharing.
Awesome.
So the next few slides we're going to go through pretty quickly. I know we're almost short of time, but just as a heads up, there are a handful of slides and a lot of them are mostly resources. And so you can go, they're live links, you can go through it on your own as well. But to head back, so before you get started in sharing your data, you want to ask yourself a few questions. Who is the target audience that's going to be reviewing these results? What do I want these results to communicate to the people? And how much time do I have and do I want to spend on this? Is it worth the bang? So knowing that sometimes sharing your data with administration versus families versus the district office and school board, it might look a little different. Usually I'll create one with the information that I need, and then I'll make a copy and maybe label it something different. Or if I'm sharing it out with bigger communities, I would make a copy of that too and maybe hide out all the faces or highlight certain things about certain groups that I want to share versus if I was sharing it with the students or the families. What's the purpose here? What's the goal of sharing this information? What you want to make sure that you're communicating it very clearly and very quickly to be able to, for folks to understand what you are trying to deliver, just in case they don't have any context. Use call out boxes, just like we did in some of those slides, to be able to highlight the major components. If they only have 5 minutes to look at your data, what do you want them to see? And then, of course, how much time do I have on this? I started off as an elementary counselor, hand counting my data and being able to do that and trying to use different ways to be able to highlight that. And was it worth the bang? Should I just focus on my energy on collecting this data if I already have this? And maybe as we continue to create or refine our system in collecting that component or that data, maybe I'll focus on this. So how much time do I have to collect it, to be able to share it, to be able to share the work that we've been doing?
And think outside of the box. It doesn't have to be a PowerPoint presentation. We don't really do those anymore, but it doesn't have to be something huge. It can just be an email even to your staff of, hey, thank you so much for helping us and supporting these lessons we did throughout the past 2 months. Here's some information about how those all went. It could be a social media thing. We're lucky at our site. We have someone who does all our social media for us, because if I was in charge, it would be horrible. And so we can send them things and they'll make a beautiful thing on Canva and they'll post it out for everyone to see. So be creative, and it doesn't need to be something that feels really stiff, and it depends on your audience. And we're going to give you some resources on what those can look like too. And these are some of the other places and avenues that you can share your data as well.
One thing
go ahead. I was going to say, even like beyond just your classroom and your immediate community, looking at, I know at the CAS conferences, they have gallery type of walks, things where you can do a poster session with your school's data and information and what you've done. And so there's different places that you can share your information as well.
I'm going to put in another plug for National School Counseling Week. That was probably the first space that I was able to share my data and feel comfortable being able to advocate for my student success. It's halfway through the year. It's a great progress update for staff in the community, and it just makes sense. So I highly encourage you to use that National School Counseling Week as a flag for you to collect your data and create some way to be able to share something.
And Pinterest has tons of ideas on things. I know Nicole and I like to share the different things that we've done at our sites with each other. So right when it gets around there, we're like, what are you doing for National School Counselor Week? And so even collaborating with your friends or other colleagues around that. Like I know this year we did little highlighters and we gave them to teachers, and it said something about, we want to highlight your support for our program. But then also with that, we had a sheet next to the boxes, to the student teacher boxes with, here's what we've done with that information, and sent out a slide deck presentation as well to all the staff. So really not trying to make it like, look at what I've done, but really here, thank you for supporting all the things that we've been able to do. And like Nicole said, it doesn't have to be everything. You don't have to measure every single component of your program. Focus on one thing, whether, like I know in the chat, people were saying they love the idea of the case study student. If it's that, focus on that. If you have a group that you do, focus on that group. I know for us this year, we were measuring, that's why I had the pre and post tests of everything for our stress and anxiety lesson, to make sure that, are we really teaching the right things that kids need to know? Should we be, because we've done this presentation for the past 3 years. I wanted to reassess it and make sure that we're hitting the right concepts that students need, and are we doing them right? So sometimes it's just to help reevaluate how you're doing things that you've been doing for a long time.
ASCA, as you know, has tons and tons of resources. So here are some links also to some program results templates. If you'd like to use that, they've got Closing the Gap if you want to look at that, classroom lessons. It's a good place to start also if you just want a place to start putting in your data and continue to follow up on it. And then if you're really starting to level up your work, to apply for RAMP as well.
Yes. These are just more examples of the flashlight presentation. We were lucky this year to work with Hatching Results for our whole district to get more training. And so they share a lot of different templates of how you can highlight one particular thing in your program. So you might do it as a tier 1 intervention, or you might do a tier 2 intervention that you do. But you can use any of these templates, and they're also linked on here as well.
If PowerPoint isn't your jam, then maybe you want to do just a quick one-pager. And these are wonderful ways to visually see the work that's been going on in the student success in a fast and easy way for everybody to understand, I think. So here's some great examples that we've seen, or districts that Hatching Results has collaborated with. Mid-year or end of the year results are great, or putting them together. Whichever you decide is another wonderful, wonderful visual.
And Nicole mentioned this in the beginning, we are working with all the counselors in our district to try and have everyone create either a flashlight presentation or a one-pager or some way of just highlighting what they've done throughout the year as an end of year report. And we have some counselors who aren't going to be able to be at our in-person gallery walk, but they've been sending us their results or end of year report. And it's amazing. It's just so great to see how they're highlighting with pictures of their students, and here's how many lessons I did. And most of it is the participation data, but that's amazing too. And it's the start of being able to share this information, because I don't think anyone's really been asked to share your information with your school sites or with your district. And so it's been really great to see the things that are coming in so far.
The trick is, once you have the template in place, it's so much easier to just fill the next year. And that's the scary part, creating it in the first place. But once you do, you just continue to collaborate and build on it and share the good news. And so I'm so grateful for our counseling team in Poway, who's really pushed themselves to create what Vanessa had just shared, and to be able to see that and share with each other.
And this is a really great example of a more innovative way of doing a flashlight action results. This is actually someone we also went to grad school with who did this. He's very techie. And so do we have time, Nicole, to share this?
I think we might be running out of time, but you should be able to click it. It's definitely take the time. It's just a few minutes, but it definitely takes the time to highlight the work that we do as counselors.
It's only about 2 minutes long, but it's a really great, if you're sending it out to your staff, especially, it's a great way to kind of highlight it in a quick thing. And it's actually, this is one of the resources we have at the end. You can see, it's called Beyond. So you can create a free trial, and you can create an animated video of whatever it is that you want to make. But these are some of the different resources that I know we use. I use Canva for everything. I think I even made my Christmas cards on them. It's amazing. It's just a great resource to make your presentations just kind of pop. I know a lot of our counselors are using they're using S'more for their end of year report because it just lays out really nice and clean, and it's very user friendly. Nicole and I like to use Slides Go and Slides Carnival to create our slide presentation because they're just very pretty and they present very nice. What are some other things you like to use, Nicole?
And I know we didn't put it on there, but just Google spreadsheets. I know someone asked earlier, how do you collect it? We've been using Google spreadsheets, and I'm not as techie as Vanessa is, but I know how I can plug in my information in a spreadsheet, and they've got easy ways to make charts. I think what's wonderful about Canva and Google spreadsheets, as well as Google surveys, Google Forms, thank you. They have an easy way to just hit chart, they show it in the responses. They've got little pie charts. It's an easy way to start. And so definitely highly recommend utilizing Google if you haven't already done so.
I think honestly, one of the best skills I brought into counseling was knowing Excel a little bit. I was an administrative assistant for a little bit, and in that time I had to learn Excel. And I feel like the skills I learned from that have helped me a lot as a counselor in collecting data and really looking at how to create charts and all of those things. So if you ever have an opportunity to take an Excel class, especially around creating charts and organizing data on there, I would highly recommend it. It has helped me so much in just saving time as well. All right, and then
I know we went over time. We appreciate those of you who were able to stay till the end for questions. We are thankful you all have joined and shared in the responses as well. And thank you for all the work that you all do behind the scenes. We know we're right there in the trenches with you, and we appreciate you and being able to learn a little bit more, and hopefully something you'll be able to gather here from today to continue your work and being able to share your student success through and advocating through data.